Hello, Rock the Closing listeners. Today, I'm very excited to share with you that we have an amazing guest, Robert Arnone, with us. He is a real property manager. He is the president and the CFO of RCA Management Properties, LLC. He manages properties in New Jersey, New York City, and the Hamptons. If you want to get in touch with Robert, and this is part of our advertisement, Robert can be reached via www.rcamanagementllc.com, or his phone number is 212-918-4698. And don't worry if you didn't catch that, Google RCA Management Properties and you will find Robert, or go to our website, Rock the Closing, and we will have all the information there. Let me give a little bit of background and information why we invited Robert to our series. First of all, it's very important to learn what a management company is doing for a building. But beyond that, I have met Robert over a year ago, and I looked him up and his management company because as real estate attorneys, we often receive the question from building owners, from board members, hey, could you recommend us a good management company? And then I think I can tell, generally real estate attorneys will respond, well, let me think about that, okay? But with Robert, we don't have to think because he has an exceptional management company, which is very highly rated. And I don't know how he does that, but it's something really rare that you will not easily come across, especially in New York City. So I would like to give a very, very warm welcome to Robert. And Dalia, do we have any questions for Robert to start off?
Yes. First, I would really want to welcome you, Robert, and thank you so much for joining our podcast. We are so honored to have someone like you join us, because it's usually just me and Orsolya talking, so it's nice to have different perspectives. So just diving right in, I would love to know how you have built your company in this uber competitive environment, and how do you keep it growing?
Hi, good afternoon, Orsolya and Dalia, and thank you for having me. As president and CFO of the company, how have I built, as I like to say, in an uber competitive environment? I built our competitive advantage for a thirst for knowledge. I published numerous articles and becoming chair of Community Trends magazine. After serving in the Army National Guard, I built a company by managing local properties. I expanded that to 3 counties in New Jersey, New York City, and the Hamptons by bringing fresh ideas, open communication, self-awareness of the residents, and streamlining operations. With these skills and knowledge, we can filter what is in the best interest of the condos and the co-op boards that we represent. We analyze insurance, reducing risk while lowering costs. We share legal rulings with clients and give them the knowledge of when the law is on their side so that they can engage with attorneys like you and Ursula. By building a trusted team, we've brought numerous budgets and projects within budget and on time. My role as president and CEO is to continue to build our moat by empowering our team and challenging the status quo for the underrepresented condominiums and co-ops in New York City.
Wow, Robert, that really sounds amazing. Could you give me a little bit of more insight and example? How do you really work? How do you translate this vision? How do you work together with the board?
Sure. Working with the boards begins well before our management agreement starts. Our facility team, which includes property managers with architectural degrees, master's degrees, and real estate, among other accreditations, will complete an initial inspection report. The report will include photos, descriptions of areas of concern, which we refer back to in future meetings. On the administrative side, we collect documents where our in-house counsel uses their legal background to determine whether the board and its members are adequately covered, which leads to a successful relationship, understanding the goals of the board.
Makes sense, Robert. With that being said, we discussed in a previous podcast how board members get elected. And so from your perspective, when these board members are changing up and they're coming and going, but you as a management company are constant and you have this institutional memory of the co-op and the condo. How do you ensure collaboration with the incoming new board members? And also, what advice would you give new board members coming into a situation with this longstanding management company?
Sure, that's a great question, Dalia. Leading a successful board with a clear path will ensure a smooth transition for incoming board members. I found that members want to become, or shareholders want to become board members for two reasons. First is to share fresh ideas and then get involved. The second could be due to frustration of there not being a clear vision. So if we revisit the previous question, the way to have a clear vision is being aligned with the goals of the board while keeping open communication with the shareholders and members. And that path will allow for good collaboration with new board members.
That really sounds fantastic, Robert. And this is also something that I usually emphasize, that transparency and clear communication is the cornerstone of any relationship, especially professional ones. But you talked about what works well. Could we now turn it a little bit to what is the most challenging part in your work?
That's a great question, Ursula. I would say talent evaluation. I earned my CPM from the Institute for Real Estate Management. One of my degrees is from Fordham University, where I earned my master's in real estate. So understanding the talent that comes with these certifications and degrees allows us to hire and understand the skills that the talent that we're bringing on will bring and will be a value add. I don't believe in hiring property managers that are administrators with no value add to the properties that we manage. It may sound a little bit harsh, but I do believe in putting talented people in front of boards, whether it's a co-op or condo, that have real estate experience. They have a value add and are not just really more of administrators, because then it ends up taking up more time of the board to really get things accomplished.
That makes sense. Me and Orsolya even have our own experiences with our own boards, previous boards, maybe future boards. And I can say for myself that it's hard when you don't know what the management company is doing and what their reasoning is behind everything and how it kind of fits in with the vision of the board. So it's good to have that perspective from you. So I'd like to ask you about when a new buyer is coming into the process. So let's say there's a buyer who's in the process of purchasing an apartment in the building that you manage, one of the buildings. What do you recommend that buyer focus on when they're sort of like interviewing with the board or meeting the board? What questions should they ask about the building? What's really important for them to know when it comes to the management company and the board?
Hey, Dalia, that's a great question. Understanding the finances of the building. Let's take Miami, for example, and the collapse of the Champlain Towers a few years back. Florida now requires reserve studies and capital contribution requirements. Well, if you look at the Florida market, the number of apartments that are now on the market have tripled in the past year or so, because those capital reserve requirements are showing that those condo associations are underfunded. And now New Jersey is requiring it by January 8th of 2025. So if you tell me your association has $500,000 in reserves, but you need to replace the roof, that's $750,000, well, now you're not adequately funded, if that makes sense. So your average buyer, unless they're listening to the podcast, won't know this, and the average broker won't bring this to your attention. So understanding the building and not making an emotional purchase is important. So let's take an example. If you have an apartment that's selling for $1 million and you think that you got a great deal, right? Because you were able to buy it for $985,000. Wow. You were able to get a discount of $15,000. But if you think of my example of the association that now has to replace their roof, but only has $500,000 in reserves for a $750,000 roof, and you're going to be assessed for $5,000 or maybe $10,000 as your contribution. Well, that apartment that you bought for $985,000, well, guess what? You just bought that apartment for $990,000 or maybe $995,000, and you don't know what future assessments are going to be coming down the pike. So really understanding the finances and the needs, the future needs of the building, and if there's capital reserves to fund those, because that discount that you thought you got may end up turning into a premium.
Robert, you're absolutely right. I agree with you that the most important for any new buyers buying a new building, emotions aside, the most important is the carrying costs going forward and what the building is facing in the future in terms of capital improvements or even penalties arising from perhaps not being in compliance with new environmental regulations, for example. So yes, and thank you so much for that insight. And this is really something to be considered by the buyers going into a building. Apartment might be beautiful and wonderful. However, can you afford it in the long term? Robert, thank you so much for all this really great advice, tips, and insights. Tell me, what's the secret behind your success, that you built a company that keeps growing and growing and you have more and more satisfied customers? What's your secret?
Well, Ursula, if I told you my secret sauce, it wouldn't be a secret anymore. But I think I have to attribute it to the organization we built. It's, you really have to be able to connect with everyone from your facility manager to your assistant property managers, to your property managers, to your legal department. And so that they understand that they're not working in silos and that each part of their job, because when I meet with a board, whether the building is being cleaned or we're taking care of the legal aspect of the building or being in compliance, they want everything. So it's important that our team understands that each job that they're doing is just as important as the next. So I think that's what we built within our organization, and having that open communication with everyone throughout our organizational chart.
Well, I think, Robert, you are an amazing success, and we can definitely see why. You are well-spoken and educated and definitely very knowledgeable about all these topics. And we've been so privileged to have you join our podcast today. I want to let all our listeners know that Robert's information will be on our website. He is, again, the president and CFO of RCA Management Properties. He has an office at 48 Wall Street. Again, the website is rcamanagementllc.com. They manage properties in New Jersey, New York City, the Hamptons. And if you have, to reach him, his number is also 212-918-4698. There's no shortage of ways to find Mr. Arnone between his website and ours. And we thank you all for listening. And we welcome you to post any questions or comments that you have pertaining to this podcast or this issue. We would be happy and honored to ask Mr. Arnone back to answer those questions if he would be so kind as to join us again one day. And in the meantime, we thank you so much for listening in on Rock the Closing. See you next time. Thank you for tuning in to Rock the Closing. This podcast is hosted by real estate attorneys who offer valuable insights. Please remember that the content is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Always consult a qualified professional before making any decisions. This podcast is copyrighted by Rock the Closing, and any reproduction, syndication, or rebroadcasting of the content requires written permission.